Hello, in this video you're going to learn to paint. Where do you start? Oh my god! What brush, what paints, what models? Forget all that headache. I've got you covered. Enter the Reaper Learn to Paint kit. Alright, so look inside. 2 brushes, awesome. 3 really cool models, and 11 paints. Let's take a look at these paints. Here is a white and a black. Those are both metallics, by the way. That is a gray. Another gray. Another regular white. Actually, there's gray, black, and white. Then we have a brown and a light brown, leather brown. We also have a khaki, a yellow, a green, and a blue. Alrighty, so some other tools you're going to need are some blue poster tack, a paper plate to use as a paint palette, an X-Acto knife, a rinse pot of water, and some paper towels. Let's go to the bathroom. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, this is a sink. What you're going to need is a paper towel, an old toothbrush, and some dish soap. Put it on your brush. Get a nice helping of soap on a damp brush. Now with a skeleton, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because the skeleton's kind of bendy. So be careful to support it while you scrub it. Use the tip of your brush. You don't want to damage your model, but at the same time we want to get any oils off. And these could be oils from our fingers from handling the models as well. Once you feel confident, hit it with a nice spray of water. Make sure there's no soap bubbles. Then we want to flick the majority of the water off. Then we want to go ahead and place it on our paper towel. You can see it's happy there with all the other little figures. Okay, so as an optional step, one thing we want to consider is when we go to paint our model, we don't want to be holding it within our thumb and forefinger. So what you'll need is some poster tack. That's what this is. And you want to take your poster tack and work it in a little bit, pull it, stick it back together. And you want to take this and affix this to a surface that will allow you to comfortably hold your miniature. A lot of people will use another paint pot like such, and you would apply your poster tack to the top and then your miniature. I actually have something other people use are prescription bottles. Take your poster tack, smush it on down. Then you take your model, put that on top, squeeze it down onto the base, and sometimes it helps to kind of work this in a little bit around the sides to get a good grab, and then push on it. Yep, the base isn't moving. The model is, because this is a little flimsy, but the base isn't, and that's what's important. So when we go to apply paint with our brush, yeah, we don't have to hold it with our thumb and forefinger. And this right here is much more comfortable. And you can rotate it. You can flip it upside down, to the side, do pretty much whatever you want. So this is an optional step, but I do highly recommend it. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and talk about the 3 steps that we're going to be using during this whole painting process. So we have the base coat, where we're going to apply an even coat of paint all across the miniature. And we were going to vary some of the colors depending on what objects we're doing. Once we get the base coats down, then the next step is going to be to apply some shades to the recesses of the model. It's a pretty common practice. And then once you do that, well, then you have to go ahead and put some highlights in to catch the raised edges of the model. So for the most part, you're going to see that with a lot of tutorials. It's base coat, shade, and highlight. And it's really the main foundation really for miniature painting. There's a lot of techniques out there, but a lot of them are variations of trying to get the same effect of getting a shade or getting a highlight. Now, when we do our shade, we're going to be doing a wash. That's going to be our technique to get the shade done. And our highlighting, we're going to be using a dry brushing technique. Okay, so next we're going to talk about loading of the brush. So now when you apply your paint on the palette, after you give it a good shake, you can get yourself a nice little drop down there and grab about a brush load of water and put the water pretty much next to that drop. And then draw some paint out. And you're looking for roughly about a 1-to-1 ratio. You can put it on your nail to get an idea of how thick it is. And when you put your paint in the brush, you don't want to dip your brush all the way in the paint. You really just want to get the tip of the brush so it doesn't get into the ferrule. So now you can see I'm applying the base coat. And this is pretty standard. You just want to work in a fashion where you're not going over the paint that you've already applied to the model. So you can see I started on the legs and I'm working mine around the leg and then kind of up on the lower part of the torso. And generally speaking, as long as the paint's still wet, you can retouch it again. So, but you really want to kind of work all the way up through each object that you're painting. So now I'm at the under the arms, again on the lower portion of the hips, and you can kind of see that I'm taking careful notice not to go back over areas I've already touched. If you do that, you're going to leave brush marks. So, kind of if you think about it, if you were painting a cylinder, you would start in one area and work your way all the way around the cylinder to where you started from. So here's the finished base coat, and I've slowed it down a little bit so you can kind of get an idea. The base coat we used was the desert sand, right? So that's pretty much the base coat for all of the bones on the miniature. So now we're going to move along and we're going to base coat. Okay, so the base coat paint we're going to use next is going to be this Harvest Brown. We're going to start by applying it onto the bow. This is a darker brown. In our kit, we also have a light brown that we're going to use later. Once you get the majority of the bow done, you see I made a little mess up there. I had to sop up with my empty brush and actually went back over again with my khaki color, the desert sand. So now we're going to go ahead and hit the quiver with that Harvest Brown. And same concept, you don't want to go back over areas you've already touched with the brush. Now we're going to hit the straps, and it's pretty basic. You have to use some precision when you're getting there underneath the arms. But like I said, if you make a mistake, you can stop up with the empty brush, and there we're pretty much finished with the Harvest Brown. Still base coating. So now we're going to go ahead and grab a metallic color to put the metallic tips on that bow. So the metallic color we're going to use is Blade Steel. To be honest with you, Reapers metallics probably aren't the best in the industry, but they're acceptable. And I actually struggled a little bit with this one as it kind of came out a little watery. So when you go ahead and you're applying some water to the paint to dilute, use a little less than you were on your earlier coats. So right there, I went ahead and finished the two metal ends to the bow. And also the brush is a little cheap and it was splaying out on me. Next, with the same paint, that Blade Steel, we're going to hit a metal band at the bottom of that arrow quiver. And that should finish us up. And again, I made a mess, and you can see I'm using another brush to basically suck up that paint. And while it's still wet, if you do it while it's still wet, you can catch it. And here I am actually hitting those metallics again because I did have some issues trying to get it to cover. I kind of thinned it a little too much. So like I said, just about straight out of the pot with those metals. So yeah, that'll do it for the metal paint. So now we're going to go ahead and grab the Naga green. And this is going to be the base coat for the platform that the miniature is standing on. We generally refer to that as the base. In this particular base, it looks like some sort of grass. And you can see right there, I was using a paper clip if you get a clog in your bottles. So this is pretty basic. You just lay down another base coat, roughly a 1-to-1 mixture with water, and that's it. So now we're going to the next color, which is the blue. And that we're just going to use on the flights of the arrows. And that's what we're going to base coat that with. Pretty basic stuff. Now we hit the leather brown, because I realized that the leather brown was actually supposed to be used for the bow. But I did use a darker color. And the reason why it's important is from a contrast perspective, when you look at the back of the model. So I went back over it, the bow with a light brown. Not a big deal. And also the shafts of the arrows right there. I hit that real quick. So, and there's the finished product of all the base. Okay, so apply the wash. Like I mentioned before, this is what we're going to do to get into the recesses of the model to get some contrast between the base coat and some separation. So we are going to use the black that comes in your set, the pure black. And now instead of doing a base coating dilution, we're going to add about 6 brush loads of water to that 1 drop of paint. We get this really runny paint, and that's just going to fall straight into the model as you brush all of the bones with this black. And you can see when you apply that how the paint just runs into the recesses. And that's the effect that we're looking for. Now you're going to want to go through as you're doing it and make sure that you're not allowing too much paint to pool up in certain areas. When it dries, it won't look right. So you really just want it in the recesses, and you want only a thin layer to be on the base coat that you previously applied. And I'm basically working my way all through the bones of this skeleton creature. And that's it. That was the wash done to all the bones. It's pretty fast and painless. We're going to use the same mixture to apply to the bow. Although the directions do call to use, I believe, a watered down brown. But I went ahead and used black, and looking back on it, I might have changed what I was doing, but that's fine. So moving along with these washes. Okay. Right now, still doing these washes. Now I'm hitting that bow with that super thin paint, and that's going to get into the grains of that wood. Now the base is real fun too, because there's lots of texture for that wash to fall into, and it really brings the base to life, starts to make it look more three-dimensional. And that's really what you're getting at here with this washing, and getting things to fall down in deep into the crevices. It makes your base coat pop out, and it basically black lines your recesses. Even if you're washing with colors that aren't black, it still has the same effect, like a black border on a white photo, right? Very similar, hence why we call it outlining. So here I am pretty much finishing up. I actually started putting some of that black into more of the bones to get some pop. Also hit the shafts of the arrows. And now we're going into our dry brushing phase. So we've already finished step 1 and step 2. Step 3 is dry brushing. And this is what's going to be our highlighting, right? So first thing we're going to do is grab some of the desert sand. Or I'm sorry, that is dragon white. And you're going to take some of that, put it on your palette. Use that brush we haven't been using, the square brush, and you can see I'm applying it all over the model. What you do is you take that paint and you rub it vigorously on your paper towel. You basically rub it off, and you can't even hardly tell there's any paint left on the brush itself. But trust me, there's pigments there. And then you take that brush and you start to drag it across the upper portions of the model. So on the bones, you're pretty much going to hit everything except for where the recesses were when you did your wash. And that's pretty much it. I mean, it really makes it pop out, and you'll see how that works. Now I'm doing the same technique, that dry brush technique, with the yellow paint on the base, which is supposed to be grass. And voila, all of a sudden, with a little bit of effort, that base looks like it's, a little prairie. So we're going back here and we're grabbing some of the light brown, and we're going to dry brush the quiver there, and also the bow. Pretty much everything that we did in the harvest brown, we're now going to do the leather brown, which is the light brown dry brush to those areas. And as a final step, I believe we're going back with the dragon white. And we're going to hit some very fine areas of the bones to really bring out that skeletal feel. And you can see I'm using my thumb a lot. If the paint's a little thick, sometimes dry brushing will get kind of pasty. And here I am, I didn't really like the way that the bow looked. So I kind of went back and I hit it with some leftover brown on the palette. And yeah, so dry brushing, it's a pretty cool effect, and it doesn't take no time at all. You just have to get used to knocking off just about all of the paint on the brush. Just keep rubbing it on the paper towel until there's no paint showing up in the paper towel. But like I said, trust me, there will be paint there. So here you can see that we're going to grab that white with the bones, and it's really going to make that skeletal area pop. Matter of fact, I actually probably put too much white. This is supposed to be a final highlight that you're not supposed to put all over the bones. But it actually looked so good that I got a little crazy with it. And, it was just kind of a personal taste. Artistic license, if you will. This is your miniature after all. Paint it how you want. Use my advice. I basically just went through the instructions that are found in the kit, and I showed you step by step how to do it. Now, I try to keep this video pretty condensed, hence why I've sped everything up. If you want to watch this at full speed, I'm going to go ahead and link that in the notes to the video. It's basically going to be an unlisted video release that you can watch at regular speed. And it won't have this narration. I'll just be talking through while I'm painting, but it might help you if you really just want to, check it out. So here's the next model in the list. It's going to be this orc, by the way. So I'm looking forward to that. So make sure you keep an eye out for this second video where we're going to paint that second miniature, which is the orc that comes in the Learn to Paint kit. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I worked real hard on it for you. And I truly hope that it helps somebody who's painting for the first time or thinking about getting into painting. Remember, this box was only $30 for all of the models, paints, brushes, pretty much everything you needed. So it was lots of fun. Make sure you subscribe so you get notified when I come out with that second video. Till next time, guys, peace out.